I believe there's kind of an asymmetrical nature to the battle as well. And like RFK Jr., Trump, their household names, they have a daily platform they can go on to kind of spew this misinformation. And as unfortunate as it is, most people probably don't have like trading cards of their favorite scientists. Like you guys aren't as known. So how do you?
Well, we're on the Brandon Clark podcast here,
That
so
is right. We're taking the right steps. Yes. I am curious though, how do you push back against that? How do you engage more people with the facts?
yeah, I mean, Peter and I talk about this quite a bit in the book. One of the things that we think is really important is to sort of arm people with the tools to understand how science works. Because if you don't really understand how science works, then it's easy for you to be weaponized into thinking, into believing the caricatures that some of these folks have tried to create, that we're in it for the money, we get rich off of all this government grant money. No, the government grant money supports our research programs, it supports our students and postdocs, our institutions determine what our salaries are. And so there are all these myths about the way science works. Peer review, it's so critical to understand that scientists can't just claim whatever they want to claim and publish it in the leading journals. It has to go through this gauntlet of independent review by the other leading scientists in the field. And so this is, again, what Carl Sagan described as the self-correcting machinery of science. It's something that's sort of unique about the scientific enterprise. And it's the reason that science, brings us continually towards a better understanding of our natural world, because it has these self-correcting mechanisms. And it's really important for people to understand that, because otherwise it's easy to convince them, that scientists are these evil villain caricatures that the other side has tried to make us out to be. And so that's something that we talk about in the book. And Peter, I know, has some thoughts about this as well.
Yeah, I mean, in the book, we cite this survey done by our colleagues at Research America, which is a policy group, and they do these surveys every couple of years, and the numbers are always about the same, and that is they find that 75% of Americans cannot name a living scientist. When they make their first attempt, it's usually Einstein or Jonas Salk, not realizing they've moved on.
And the 25%, by the way, who can name somebody, typically name our friend Bill Nye, who's a great guy. He's a great communicator, but he's not like a down in the trenches scientist like Peter and me.
Yeah, I mean,
the viewers
struggling
can
over
name two
grants and
now.
papers and that sort of thing. So we're invisible and almost by design, because the research universities, especially the academic health centers with the research universities, like to control the brand of the organization. And even though you have academic freedom, they don't necessarily like it when their docs and scientists speak out, or you kind of get this kind of mixed message. Well, you're an academic, you're free to speak out, dot, 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 but don't screw this up and don't get the institution in trouble. And so you do it with the sort of Damocles over your head. And of course, if you're out there in the public domain enough, as both Michael and I are, I mean, eventually we do. At least I won't speak for Michael, but eventually I do screw it up, and I do get the institution in trouble. And you want to know that you have the backing of the institution. So
Yeah, you
the
got people out there looking
consequences,
for us to say one wrong word,
right?
anything wrong that we do will be weaponized to try to bring us down because we're a threat to some powerful interests.
Right. And so by being invisible, that gives the bad actors, there's a vacuum there. So the bad actors then come in and portray us as Michael says, in these kind of shadowy figures and white coats plotting nefarious things. And so, the bad actors say I'm a shill for the pharma companies, even though it was the opposite. We developed a low-cost COVID vaccine that bypassed the big pharma companies, reached 100 million people in India and Indonesia, $2 to $4 a dose, proving you could bypass big pharma companies. But that's not convenient for their narrative. Or, they've got me making the COVID virus, and it's in some laboratory basement at Davos in the World Economic Forum with George Soros. And never been to Davos, never met George Soros, but the crazier the conspiracy, the more people believe it. And they, again, as you used a very good word, Brandon, which is the asymmetric nature of it, without being out there in the public domain a lot, it makes it, we're easy targets. We're easy work for them.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that when it comes to recommendations, like how do we combat that? There are scientists like Peter and myself who are out there trying to communicate the science and implications to the public, but there need to be a whole lot more scientists, a much more diverse community of scientists, younger scientists, And, and we still don't have that, in part because the other side has been so effective at frightening would-be science communicators from stepping up to the task, knowing that they too will be attacked like Peter has been, like I have been. And so, in the end, we ask for some bravery on their part to step up, because the stakes couldn't be greater. They're literally the future of our civilization, the future of our planet.
And I actually, well, I think that segues really well into what I was going to ask you about propaganda, which is kind of, I've grown up with social media, so I've kind of always been around it, but I'm sure you guys could speak to how it's maybe enabled this propaganda to like a whole nother level. I'm sure before you could just go on Facebook and see 1 million likes on a post that says vaccines cause autism. It was more of like dark backroom meetings or something like that. So could you guys speak to like the role that social media plays in this, for better or worse?
Yeah, I mean, Peter, you might talk about the pile-on, because that started out really through Elon Musk and his weaponization of social media to try to force you into a debate with, a proponent of anti-science.
Yeah, I got in 2023 there was a big pile on social media where I was being pressured by Joe Rogan to debate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. about vaccines when he was running for president, and then Elon Musk weighed in, and I forget exactly what he said. What are you hiding and this kind of stuff? So you're like, what the heck is this? It's got every follower on Twitter except the ones following Taylor Swift. I mean, it was just nuts. So that's when I think I reached out to Michael then, or he reached out to me, and I said, what's going on here? Because the attacks on climate science preceded the attacks on biomedical science by about a decade. So Michael was really seasoned in this to
A
help me
couple
figure out what was
decades,
going on.
a
Yeah.
couple decades, yeah.
And I think part of it was, a big part of it was, they wanted someone to legitimize Bobby Kennedy as a serious presidential candidate. And what better to think than have him out there with serious scientists, and I didn't want to help him do that, but I also thought it sent the wrong message of how science is done,
Yeah.
that it's done with debates with people who have no qualifications. I can't think of an example where we've advanced science through a debate with unqualified people. We have mechanisms like that, and I thought it would actually set us back, because basically by being out there with him, as Michael pointed out to me, well, I think what sealed it for me is, I think you said, Michael, something to the effect like, well, the minute you would appear with him, you lose 90% of the battle, because you've basically given equal weight to his crackpot ideas to your decades of studying science.
Yeah, the nerd that I am, I like to frame it in terms of Bayesian statistics. And there are things called priors, like what do you start out with? What does your audience start out believing? And if you get up on the stage with a science denier, the prior is like you're saying, we start out on the 50-yard line, when in fact the ball should really be on the 99.99, like basically in the end zone, or as close to the end zone as you can get. And so that's exactly right. We sort of, Peter, I think it was you who used this example. It was a colleague of yours who said that, if I debate you, speaking to some, promoter of anti-science who has no credentials, it's going to look great on your resume and awful on mine. And that sort of tells you everything you need.